we're starting. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
No, you can go.
I'll say that at the next one. It's fine.
I can edit all of this out if you need to ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure on end time, because we wanted to keep it to 30 minutes each, but of course now we're like about 10 minutes in. Are you okay, Kathleen?
Oh,
Okay.
yes, absolutely, for sure.
Okay.
Yes. We should take as much time as we need. I have nothing going on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Try to time it so that I'll get to about 10 minutes just sharing, and then there should be about 20 minutes for whatever. So if I get to like past 10 minutes, just tell me to stop. Okay. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. All right. Okay, everybody see that?
Yes.
All right. I'm not gonna see anyone's face. I'm taking all the faces off so that I'm not super weirded out by that. Okay, so my name's Kimmy Noonen. Oh no, I need to see somebody's face. This is weird. Okay. I can't talk to my computer screen. Okay. My name is Kimmy Noonen, and my website's kimmynotkim.com. So what I'm going to show you guys now is 3 pieces that I've just been working on since we started the crit group together here since the beginning of the new year. And I'm going to start with a quote. This is from the book You Are Here, which Arden suggested to me, which I super love. There's an introduction by Stephen Hall. And it says, it's kind of long, but I'll read it. Orienteering is such an odd but impressive word that it has always stuck with me, but in fact moves me to propose a related concept to describe a process somewhat like orienteering, but more personal, more historical, more associative, more metaphorical, and perhaps more spiritual. Orientating, or crashing through a larger landscape of memory and experience and knowledge, trying to get a fix on where we are in a multitude of landscapes that compose the grander scheme of things. Orientating begins with geography, but reflects a need of the conscious, self-aware organism for a kind of transcendent orientation that asks not just where am I, but where do I fit in this landscape? Where have I been? Where shall I go? And what values will I pack for the trip? What culture of knowledge allows me to know what I know, which is often another way of knowing where I am? And what pattern, what grid of wisdom can I compose on my accumulated idiosyncratic geographies? So that quote really speaks to me in this process of what I'm going through. And I mentioned in my last artist talk that mapping has always been something that I've sort of woven through a lot of my work and kind of come back to. And I kind of just decided in this season that I was just going to give myself permission to focus on what is it about mapping that I am so moved by, and simultaneously, what is it about fabric that holds me so closely? Because I consider myself painting, but often I'm using a lot of 3-dimensional things. So I just wanted to let myself focus on those ideas and go a little deeper with them. So this piece, I have been head to the sewing machine to get this to a place where it's ready for some sort of feedback. It's still, I'd say, still in progress, and a little bit of it's a prototype to sort of figure out how it would work, but I'm calling it Invasions, 78 by 71 inches. It's literally behind me in my studio right now. It's comprised of a twin-sized bed sheet and acrylic paint that's been really watered down, and spray paint, more different fabric from different varieties of types of textiles, and a lot of thread with my sewing machine is what it's made out of. And I'm just going to show you some different angles of it and different detail shots as I talk about it a little bit. But I was trying to embrace both my interest in chance, which is I was sort of informed by the Fluxus art movement when I was a young artist, and the idea of I would start with just this big bed sheet and throw it into my sewing machine. It's huge, and I just start sewing without really knowing where the needle's going, and it's sort of intentionally trying to create puckers to develop kind of a topographical landscape, but not having planned that part out. And then once I got sort of that bare bones up, I put it up on my easel with a panel behind it and started just sort of rotating it and painting onto it in different ways without having like a clear sense of direction. And then as I painted and as I added more, waiting for gravity to emerge, waiting for the piece to sort of want a certain orientation. And then once that happens, sort of stabilizing in that orientation and then starting to continue to add to it and compose on top of it. I also tried many different ways of displaying it. And this is the way that I sort of landed on for this version of this piece. But you can kind of tell it's being hung by fish line from the ceiling, from a hook in the ceiling. So it's suspended. So when a person moves past it or wind blows on it, it has sort of a mobile effect where it does move, but the top of it is firm with a piece of wood right now. And from a more conceptual perspective, I intentionally didn't add a key because it looks very map-like, and I had to hold the tension in my mind of like, it's a map, but don't think of it too much as a map because then you're getting very literal about it. So I didn't include a key because I wanted there to be some ambiguity about how to translate it in the same way that there's ambiguity in translating an abstract painting, I think. But I was asking questions of like, not just thinking about map as a expression of documenting an external landscape, but what does it look like for me to consider my internal landscape? Through work I've been doing for a long time through therapy and things like that, I've been sort of trying to understand what the inner world looks like. And as I've been going through making this piece, I was asking myself questions like, what does it look like visually for me to look at maybe when someone forces their way into me or onto me or their will onto me? How does it look for an invasion of that sort from the inner world perspective to take form and to incorporate itself into my landscape? And does it look differently when I give someone permission to change me? And how do those boundaries and borders start to shape who I'm becoming? I wrote this one down so I wouldn't forget. So like, can the idea of me actually be an exploration of changing boundaries, claims of ownership, and shared resources that all layer over each other 1,000 times to create an environment that's as complex as a landscape that we map from our external world? So there's a lot of chance and there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of sort of plowing forward into environments that I'm uncertain where it's going to go, in the same way that life unfolds that way. And then kind of wandering through emotional realities of letting these layers build up over time to see how they accumulate together. And also simultaneously thinking about the war in Ukraine right now that's happening, and that how the idea of an invasion displaces really key and significant parts of people, both at the corporate level and at the individual level, and how sort of political boundaries change as environments are forced to change through different circumstances. So here's another detail shot. And then I used my 9-year-old daughter there, Charlotte, to be my model. Get that blurry gallery walking past shot. But I did install it intentionally this time. I did many different installation styles, but this one I installed so that it could be walked behind, because I was also curious about the idea of like what we have forward facing and what we have that's sort of more hidden, and that how those two things are very much the same, but they can be viewed differently from an emotional and interpersonal perspective. So, you know, the viewer has access to see the front, also to walk around it and get to the sort of the cave-like space that's much darker behind. And the way the light, it almost becomes backlit from behind. So you end up seeing the parts that, when the forward facing part, the parts that are very, very white and stark and bright, when you walk to the back facing part, it becomes darker because it's actually multiple layers of fabric. So the differences of how I see the terrain and how I interact with it, and the implications that each sort of part of the composition plays, is really different depending on which side I'm looking at it from. And also even the stitch marks look and appear different. The paint splatters have a different sense to them. And the way light interacts with the piece is very different depending on where I'm looking at it from. And also I really appreciate that there's another picture of her. She just likes to touch everything. But I'm also, that's something that I want actually, or what I want to navigate is human participation in the piece, because I think that there's a part of me that's very unsatisfied with the idea of a painting just hanging on a wall and being just purely conceptual visual. So a lot of my older work did include interactive pieces. So I think that this painting is kind of me starting to get back into how do I paint and also make paintings that are interactive, socially speaking, and accessible in that way, physically. And then this is sort of, and this is my studio, a side angle. You can see how sort of skinny it is. And then as people move or the wind moves, it rotates around. So that's that piece. And then I'm gonna show you the other ones real quick, and then we can just talk about them afterwards. This is the right side is a cool shot from behind Invasions, looking at these two smaller paintings. This is the Addresses series, is what I'm started calling this. They're 8 by 10 on panel, very small little paintings. But the backstory to this is that I moved around a lot as a child, and but frequently changed homes. And it was just semi-recently that I realized I didn't have any of the addresses from any of the places that I lived as a kid. And my parents didn't have them either. No one could find them. So I went out on this sort of deep dive on the internet and was able to sort of pull out these addresses that I have very vague, distant memories of, and started looking at them on Google Maps, and decided to just start a series where I'm trying to think about what the shape of memory looks like, and the incorporating little bits of things that I recall from my childhood, but also asking the question of like, how would I experience these places as an adult, like driving around with my phone on Google Maps all the time? What's the tension between those two worlds? And I'm limiting myself to only using paint on them right now, partly because I've been thinking about how much I love adding volume to things that maybe we don't often see as voluminous, like paintings. But it feels really restrictive to not let myself do that to these. But I think the restriction is helpful, because I'm like, I can't put volume to these memories. These memories are almost non-existent. So being forced to sort of let them be flat, and dealing with how uncomfortable and how much I hate their flatness, it kind of brings out the more the sort of the rawer side of the fact that I'm grieving the fact that those memories are very flat and the experiences are flat, and I'm so angry about it. So it's kind of a very personal series, but in my imagination, I'm seeing myself just continuing to chip away at these until I have a much larger collection of them, so that like tiny small gestures sort of accumulate into a little bit more of an emotional intensity, emotional gravity, for how that lack of having memories and the confusing memories that do exist, and how that idea can translate into paint, how it would feel. So that's it. I felt that was fast. I didn't talk too fast. That is all that I have for us.
It's really a privilege to be able to see these and to hear the backstory behind these. I'm super physically drawn to the Invasions piece. I mean, just as soon as I saw it behind you, I just want to actually be in the space. I feel this loss that I'm only seeing it on a little tiny screen. And then hearing the thought process behind Addresses is it felt like kind of a gut punch to me. So I have a very similar childhood background. I moved every 2 or 3 years. My father was in the Foreign Service. And I don't remember a lot of those places, and trying to, like, I don't remember the names of any of my elementary school teachers. So I feel like there's a gap. So that's really, it feels like a privilege that you're sharing that with the world. So thank you. And
no, that's really nice of you to say.
You to do, because I think that's such a powerful thing that isn't talked about that much. There's nostalgia in terms, like when people talk about memory, they often talk about strong memories that have power over you and your current life, like in form, like especially in the form of nostalgia. But what does it mean when your life is this kind of fragmented checkerboard of half remembered things that are who you are, but that you cannot hold on to and grasp onto? And I think that's the case for so many people. I know that that's definitely the case for me, and like the kind of guilt that goes along with that. That's really, really powerful stuff. I don't know if this is the first kind of series where you're talking about that specific concept.
Yeah.
I would love to see you kind of expand that concept in as many different ways as possible. I really like the idea of you kind of holding yourself back from what feels comfortable. Therefore, doing the flatness is one way that you can hold yourself back from doing what feels comfortable, and therefore kind of showing that loss. I don't think the flatness is the only way that that could happen.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, the volume and the substantialness of those paintings, they are, you know, less physically obvious, I suppose, than a sculpture or something that is very materially luxuriant, like Invasions is. But I wonder if there's other ways that you can kind of strip away volume and luminosity. And that might mean, I don't know what that means exactly for, might mean taking away, or like finding other ways to deal with subtraction and taking away from the surface, working straight on the wall, or working with lights, or working only with the line or with red. You know, I don't know what that exactly means for you, but I think that that idea of putting yourself into this uncomfortable space by making it flat, that's only touching the surface. And I think that there's more that you can kind of go along those lines for.
Yeah. No, that's right.
But I think
that's great. Yeah.
I mean, that piece, I'm sure everybody, I don't want to just be the only person who's kind of blabbering on.
I don't ever get to hear from you. So no.
So it's like I want to wrap myself in it. And I think one point in your talk where I got really excited is where you showed the image of your daughter kind of almost behind the piece. That got me super excited about what this could mean for the future, or for a series, or for an installation. Because it doesn't feel, it's not just a painting, it's not just supposed to be seen in a two-dimensional space. It does need to interact with the viewer in a really physical way, because yes, it's a map like you're describing, but it's also a character, it's also a body, it's also a domestic tool, like, you know, it comes from a bed sheet. It's also like an environment in and of itself. So, you know, a map is taking the third dimension and flattening it, right? That's like inherently what a map means. But then what you've done is take a map, which is two-dimensional, and a flattening tool, and then expanded it back into becoming its own environment. So it's like this weird, amazing cycle. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. It's so well said.
I think it's really exciting. I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, this is like their first time seeing it in like a traditional way. I've sent them weird shots on cell phone pictures, but
well, Kimmy, we've been seeing it in process too, so we have that privilege, but it's super exciting to see it resolved and finalized, and I think it's really strong, very engaging and compelling. I would love to see you continue making more of these. Yeah, what Kathering was saying, is really cool to think about that, of like the 3D going to the 2D and then you going to the 3D. And I really like the idea too of the taking those very, very vague memories. I feel like that, I know you're just scratching the surface, like you're just thinking about how to start approaching that content in your work. And I think the idea of like thinking of the vagueness of the memory, making the art feel way more vague, I think would be interesting. And just that stripping down and like things that Kathering was saying, those feel, I thought those were nice, but I think that, yeah, I think that those are like, you push it. Yeah. And then I also think, what was I gonna say? Two more things. One was, I was gonna comment on how your work previously and something that you're really interested in is with the interaction with other people and the social exploration and how people engage with one another. So I do think that the work that you're doing like this, where it can engage the person in a different kind of way than just looking at an artwork on a wall, it really is like, makes sense for you. And you'll get it just, people can interact in different ways and that all becomes part of the art. So I think that it's just really awesome that you're started to work with this, and and that it's a bed sheet, and there's just so much content in there, and beautiful aesthetically to look at.
Thanks.
Yeah. So
that was a
kudos.
Something that I was thinking, it was just like the bed sheet element. I was like, is that something I should like upgrade? Like, should I start making it out of nice fancy linen so that it doesn't whatever? So
use like old, like I think you could use like old clothes that maybe of your girls you're going to give to Goodwill or something. You could cut them up. And I love that idea that these are like from life. And that they actually physically, those fabrics they literally contain DNA. They have a life in them. It's true. You know, if you think of it like that like if your children slept on that sheet or you slept on it or whatever, that it actually holds part of you in it. And I think that is,
like that too. Like it already feels like it's the skin of a person, like that it has its own, it's not just something that is a depiction of something else. It has its own life. So the more obvious that this comes from domestic spaces, the more powerful I think it's going to be. Particular.
That's what I was going to say. I do like the bed sheet, but I don't know that it's evident necessarily unless you put it in the material list. And I think you could push that further if you wanted it to be more autobiographical and about domestic space. Because I do like that. I wrote down also, is the bed sheet significant? And I think it could be, right? But I'm not sure it's emphasized at the moment.
Yeah, it was kind of a muddy middle. It was maybe like
I was wondering if other people were that's something I was also considering. Like, would I want this to be patterned bed sheets? Like have it become obvious coming from this space? What do you all think about?
Well, I was just gonna say, like a fitted bed sheet has that, it becomes apparent what it is. And I'm guessing you kind of just use this white flat sheet because you had that as like a piece of fabric just to get going on this. But it's like it might be like a happy accident, like maybe it wasn't your intention, but now like we're looking at it going, no, like the bed, making it more, or like I'm looking behind Kathering at just like curtains hanging there with those little loops or something, that it becomes that the material is clear to people, even if it's been transformed, but there's something about it that reminds us of home, or something that was used and lived with. So like shower curtains, the fitted bed sheets that go on a crib or whatever, all that kind of stuff, or pieces of clothing from your daughters. And I could imagine those things where you could see pieces of it hinting, not like super obvious, I don't think, like, but maybe subtly would be cool.
That's great. Yeah, that's really helpful feedback. I think I'm coming out of a tradition of like extremely intellectual, extremely distant from your work. So even to give you the background information about this stuff is like, oh, this is going to sound so like feminine or like, like whatever the bad words are in
Oh.
the art world,
No.
like super feely or super like this is like a art therapy or something. And those things affect the way that I'm making work, and when I'm being really authentic about how I'm making it, this is the kind of work that matters most.
Super powerful about how you're taking a form and a process that was used by the abstract expressionists and by a bunch of white males who thought that their art was only about art and that it was therefore the purest form of art, right? Like I see kind of themes of Morris Louis or Pollock in the pouring of the paint, except you are doing it on a bed sheet, and it is about an emotional landscape. And I think that's kind of wonderful that it touches on these histories and this kind of academic take on art, but then it's also flipping it on its head. That seems like something to embrace.
Thank you. That's super awesome to hear. Yeah. It's like literally what I want to do my whole life. Yeah.
I think we've all gone through that. We've gone through the art school establishment and gone through that brainwashing. I've definitely people tell me if someone in your work can tell that you are a woman, then you've made some error then you've made.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get that brainwashing out of you.
It really is. It's been about a decade. I'm still working on it, but yeah. So
Kimmy, I wanted to tell you, when you were talking about how as you were making the big piece that you didn't know where it was going. You were just sort of allowing the process to be, to lead, to take you wherever it needed to go and find its own direction. I just thought that was so strong, just in how it is in its presence, but also in, creating, making your ideas into this physical format, where I like the paintings, and I'm sure if you make, like you're saying, you want that to be like a series of something that you can keep working with. But I think that the difference there is that the visual language in the paintings feels more to me like you're taking, imagery that, like it's almost like not quite your own. It's a recognizable way to talk about maps and geography and erasure, which is relevant. And maybe you just keep doing that and in order to let it evolve and see what it goes to. But I think what everybody's responding to with the bigger piece is that it's so much more open. It is, and in being open, it allows us to ask more of those questions and also see a bit more of you in it.
let's see.
Yeah, I do the concept and where you're kind of thinking about the addresses series is really exciting. I want to see that concept continue to get pushed, though. It does feel like you're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Whereas Invasions feel like it's really fleshed out. It knows what it is, and it's luxuriant materially, physically, and conceptually.
Thank you. That's so
Totally.
encouraging. Thank you. And I totally agree. I was like, I don't know if I want to show these addresses things yet. So
No, it's
really
good to see
affirming to
them.
hear. Yeah. And I'm trying to lean into all of the valid critiques that I've had in the grad school years where I was like, just show us what you got and see where it goes. So I appreciate all the feedback. And I'm really excited. I think that the last thing I'll say is that I think at the beginning of this critique group, I was like, I don't want to like bounce around from one thing to another. I want to really focus and dig down into one frame for a while. And I don't think I've ever wanted to do that because I've never been like energized by what I've been doing and really excited to like explore something deeply. And I think that this is like, yes, like I'm so excited to start the next one or to keep working, see what happens. So thank you for your encouragement and
I just wanted to ask one more question too. I'm curious, like, just for you personally, when you were the act of making that piece, did you enjoy all the sewing and all that?
So fun.
Like the process you like, it really clicks for you, it seems like.
Yeah, it was great. And it was really fun to like even get stabbed by needles that like thousands, hundreds of needles, keeping fabric up there so that I could sew it on after I was getting it composed, and just being like, just like cussing at the sewing machine when I'm getting, it was just very alive. The whole thing was very lively. And it was a lot of crying and it was a whole physical
Blood,
process.
sweat, and tears went into that
Yes.
thing too. So there's more DNA on there from your own blood. Love it.
Well,
I love it.
I
Very
will
exciting, Kimmy.
give the floor to Lisa. Thank you so much, Kathering, for your feedback.
Thanks for
Alright.
showing. I think it's time you can start applying to like grants for installation space. Expand this. It would be really, I think you're ready.
Yes, well, and that's a whole nother thing that I won't even get into much, the like where, you have to have very specific spaces, and it's getting into the size element of it, but I'll just, if you ever think of any.
I feel like a storefront would work really well. Not maybe as its ultimate location, but there's a lot of those calls for like storefronts, right? Because you've got this front and back and this backlit thing. I wonder if that would be a place to kind of try out.
Half of my art career has been spent in storefront spaces.
I know you have a niche. You already have a reputation as the storefront girl.
All right. I'm going to stop recording.